enough for times when things get a bit lean. And then, said Mr. Eccles, government should lighten up. It's the lean times that private industry should be allowed to work, he said. Hand in glove, he said, with government in order to turn things around. What he was suggesting was a public-private partnership between industry and government. It had been suggested by Hoover, but never put into full use. It was tried by Roosevelt, but World War II got in the way, and he was never able to fully address the needs of infrastructure. Those needs wouldn't be completed until the administration of Dwight Eisenhower. Some of them wouldn't be completed until the administration of Lyndon Johnson. The infrastructure that was built between the 1930s to the early 1960s was projected to last for about 30 years. It's driven our economy for at least twice that. Today, our infrastructure has crumbled to the point that it's borderline on par with most third world countries. Part of the reason for this is what former President Eisenhower called the military-industrial complex. The comfortable arrangement between former military personnel and former political staffers and the Pentagon to arrange ever larger excuses to build bombs and bullets to promote what has become a virtual constant state of warfare. What many forget is that the nation of the United States is at war. We have been since former President George W. Bush declared war on Afghanistan. That war was never canceled because he never declared an end to it, and Congress never reclaimed their authority to do it. When we look at the combined military spending of Russia and China, it comes to just under $500 billion a year. That's the total amount. When we look at the amount of money that we spend building nuclear missiles and combine that with the amount given the Pentagon, we come to a figure about twice that. That means that we could easily slash $250 billion a year from our military budget without trying very hard, and still be outspending Russia and China combined. Now, believe it or not, the Cato Institute, which is a right-wing think tank, says that about $50 billion of that is in archaic programs and equipment. We're paying for junk that hasn't been used since the 50s. Mainly because, well, we have a lot better alternatives, which, by the way, we're also paying for. Mariner Eccles suggested an ongoing public-private partnership. Okay, so let's aim for one. How could we get there with $250 billion a year? Well, there are 3D concrete printing machines today that can print the outer walls of houses. Now, I'm not suggesting that we build houses, because let's face it, we have an infrastructure to deal with, right? Let's deal with that first. So why not put some people to work designing a 3D concrete printing machine that can grade roads and print them on order? I'm guessing that throwing about $1 billion at every major college and research company, spreading it around, would get a prototype design within about a year, 2 tops. And suddenly we're down to $249 billion a year to deal with an infrastructure problem that's projected to cost $30 trillion and take a decade. But 3D printing will cut that cost in half. And suddenly, for about $1 billion, we've come up with a prototype that'll save us $15 trillion in taxes. But we can do better, can we? Sure. Instead of using normal concrete, why not use that stuff, that new self-healing concrete? I'm sure you've heard of it. It's just like normal concrete, but it's got a special bacteria mixed in. When concrete cracks normally, well, it just keeps cracking. But when this stuff cracks, well, moisture and air gets in and activates the bacteria. And the bacteria grows and forms limestone that fills in the cracks, and that makes the concrete even stronger. Now, the projected lifespan of anything built with the stuff is about 200 years. Well, that would save a couple billion a year in maintenance costs for, well, every state in the country. And suddenly, we've not only recovered the cost of the machines we use to print our roads, we've got enough money for states to invest in digitizing education. And we're back to $250 billion. And we've got education being digitized and machines that are being mass produced to print the roads. So let's throw $10 billion at helping states kick off the buildings to produce the machines. Another $10 billion to mass produce some satellites, and $30 billion for reusable spacecraft to put those satellites in orbit. I know, you're wondering, what are these going to be used for? Well, you see, once we take our communications network digital, education stops being controlled by a handful of bureaucrats in Texas. And before you freak out, I did say this was going to be a public-private operation, didn't I? That means that looking at communication for what it is, a utility is going to solve a lot of problems. It's going to lower the cost of education. And the government, which will take care of the satellites, will not control what goes on with internet connections. Why? There's plenty of internet companies out there that do that job just fine. Not all of them do, but some of them do it just fine. Now, in the winter, to give you an analogy, in the wintertime, some states have laws which say that power companies are not allowed to turn the power off of people's homes, even if they're behind in paying their bills. And the reason is that temperatures in those areas tend to drop to the point where people can freeze to death. Well, how much more important is it to be able to call a cop when a serial killer is in your house? And they're between you and any weapon that you might otherwise defend yourself or your family with. Yeah, I'd say communications is important. It's so important that one of the first things any army general does is take it out when they go to do an attack. So I think anything that's that important in wartime is probably at least as important in peacetime. So let's call communications what it is. It's a utility. And let's digitize it. Launch the satellite, kids. And suddenly, we've lowered the cost of education from about 6th grade on up to a master's degree for quite a few subjects. Not all, of course. Some things like chemistry and biology are still hands-on, but we've still done quite a good job. And but all we have to do then is take a look at what we have left. $200 billion a year that we can spend, all without raising taxes. Well, we still have to pay $15 trillion in infrastructure bills. Now, for bridges, we can still save money by airlifting bridges into place that were poured over molds using a product called aircrete. The stuff is more durable than concrete and as light as air. It also costs about half as much to produce. So, if we set aside just $150 billion a year out of our remaining $200 billion, our infrastructure is covered. The only problem left is the monster on the doorstep called technological unemployment. That's what happens when new technology results in the need for fewer jobs. You can't address that problem with trade wars. Science doesn't care what you paid for your laptop, because a laptop that does the work of 1,000 people will still be cheaper than paying a premium to import it. Still, with our national digital communications infrastructure, we've opened the door to the creation of more cottage businesses. The only problem is that technological unemployment leaves us without a home. A lot of people are suggesting that we should take the remaining $50 billion a year and spend it on something called universal basic income. But the average person says that we should spend about $1,000 per person, for every person in America. The average apartment rent in America is around $2,100. So that doesn't really get us our place to live, does it? I think I have a better idea. I'll share it with you next week. And when we get into Truman, the accidental president who became the Democratic father of Republican racism. It sounds weird, doesn't it? But, you know, we live in a weird world. You've been listening to The Professional Dreamer. Tune in, turn on, and get a healthy head change with me every Sunday when I throw out another script. I'm Jennifer Warren. I'll bake some brownies for you.